Good morning, dear students of class 11 science. Today we'll start with a new chapter, chapter number 2, biological classification. In the first chapter, we have learned about the diversity, we have learned about classification also. And we also have discussed about the need of classification. Due to the huge diversity of living organisms, there was need for classification in order to identify the living organisms and in order to place them into the respective taxa or their categories. Okay, so what does biological classification means? So classification of living organisms into different group or into different categories or taxa is known as biological classification. Okay, so here we will see the different systems of classification of living organism. Now, since the time of Aristotle only, biologists has started dividing the animal or let's say the living organisms into plants and animals since the time of Aristotle only. Okay, we could see the division or the classification of living organisms into plants and animals. You know, all the plants belong to the plant kingdom and all the animals belong to the animal kingdom. Then in 1758, Carolus Linnaeus, right, he suggested two kingdom system of classification. And what was those two kingdoms? It was kingdom Plantae and kingdom Animalia. So all the plants like herbs, herbs, trees, it belongs to the kingdom Plantae, and all the animals it belongs to the kingdom Animalia. Okay. Then in 1866, Ernest Haeckel he proposed the three kingdom classification system. So over here he added the new kingdom, kingdom Protista. So we have got the kingdom Plantae, kingdom Animalia, and Ernest Haeckel proposed the new kingdom, which was kingdom Protista, and it includes bacteria, algae, fungi, and protozoa. Then in 1956, Copeland he proposed the four kingdom system of classification, and those four kingdoms was kingdom Monera, kingdom Protista, kingdom Plantae, and kingdom Animalia. Alright, so actually the system of classification started from the time of Aristotle only. Then we can find out the six kingdom system of classification also, which was proposed by Carl Woos. Okay, we can find six kingdom system of classification also, but the most important system of classification that we have to go through syllabus is the five kingdom system of classification. I hope you have done it in class 9 also, the five kingdom system of classification. Right, so in our syllabus we have to go with the five kingdom system of classification, which is the most accepted one among the 2, 3, 4, and 6 kingdom system of classification. So who was the one who proposed the five kingdom system of classification? It was R.H. Whittaker, Robert H. Whittaker. Can you remember the name? Robert H. Whittaker, an American taxonomist, he proposed the five kingdom system of classification. And what was those five systems? It was kingdom Monera, kingdom Protista, kingdom Fungi, kingdom Plantae, and kingdom Animalia. So afterwards we'll go through the characteristics of each kingdom under the five kingdom system of classification is proposed by Robert H. Whittaker. But before that, let's check out the criteria for the five kingdom system of classifications. What were the criteria? What were the conditions, or what were the basis on which the system of classification was proposed? So, the criteria for the five kingdom system of classifications are: number one, complexity of cell structure. Number two is complexity of organism's body. Number three, modes of nutrition. Number four, modes of energy utilization. And number five is phylogenetic relationship. So these are the five basis of criteria on which R.S. Whittaker proposed the five kingdom system of classification. And before that, can you remember what are the five name or the name of the five kingdoms under the five kingdom system of classifications? It includes Monera, Protista, fungi, plantae, and animalia. So now we will discuss each of these criteria. All right. So first criteria is complexity of cell structure. So on the basis of nucleus and the structural complexity, all right, saying that on the basis of nucleus and structural complexity, you know, where is nucleus present, right? So we have primarily two types of cell. We can say prokaryotic cell and the eukaryotic cell. Okay, so first type of cell is called prokaryotic cell, the simple cell, or we can say the primitive type of cells, which include bacteria, the blue-green algae, or cyanobacteria and rickettsia. And number two type of cell is eukaryotic cells, which include eukaryotes, the complex form we can say, all right, the complex one, the complex eukaryotes, which include protista, fungi, plants, and animals. So these are the types of cells which are based on the complexity of cellular structure. So what are they? Prokaryotic and eukaryotic. Next one comes the complexity of organism's body, the second criteria. So on the basis of evolutionary history, we can now say that the earliest organisms which came into evolutions, which are evolved at the primitive time, they were a simple organisms. They were simple prokaryotic organisms, okay, which were unicellular. Uni means one, which was composed of single cell, because the word uni means one. So the organisms that came at the primitive time, or that came at the earliest time period, was the simple prokaryotes, which was unicellular, which was composed of single cell, in which the body functions was carried out by a single cell only. Then slowly, okay, later on, from the simple unicellular prokaryotes, the complex eukaryotes come into evolution. That means the complex eukaryotes have evolved from the simple unicellular prokaryotes. And these complex prokaryotes, complex eukaryotes, they used to be multicellular. Multi means many. They are composed of more than one cell. Where we can see the division of labor. That means the work or the functions of the cell has been divided among the group of cells, because we have learned that cells having the same functions will form a tissue, tissue will form an organ, organ will form a system, that we have learned. Clear? So from the simple prokaryotes, the complex multicellular eukaryotes come into evolutions. Clear? Then next one comes the modes of nutrition. And generally two modes of nutrition are recognized in an organisms, which are mainly autotrophic or photosynthetic, and number two, heterotrophic mode of nutrition. So we can see the two modes of nutrition in an organisms. They are autotrophic or photosynthetic mode of nutrition, and number two is heterotrophic mode of nutrition. Now, under autotrophic mode of nutrition or photosynthetic mode of nutrition, we can say that the green plants, which can perform the process of photosynthesis, which are called autotrophs, all right, they used to show the photoautotrophic mode of nutrition, because they used to trap the solar energy, all right, they used to trap the solar energy, and by the use of the solar energy, they can produce the food by the help of carbon dioxide and water. Because you know what is photosynthesis, right? It's the process where the green plants containing chlorophyll in the presence of sunlight, right, can produce food or glucose by utilizing carbon dioxide and water. Clear? So those green plants which are able to trap the solar energy and which can able to produce the organic food by using the carbon dioxide and water is known as photosynthesis, and those green plants are called autotrophs. Okay, and we can say that their mode of nutrition is called autotrophic mode of nutrition or photoautotrophic mode of nutrition, because the word photo means light. Okay, the word photo means light. So in the presence of light, green plants perform the process of photosynthesis and they used to produce the food particles. So it's also called photoautotrophic mode of nutrition, or we also call it holophytic mode of nutrition. Clear? Then there are certain bacteria which can prepare their organic food from carbon dioxide and hydrogen sulfide and methane. Okay, there are certain bacteria which can produce their food from carbon dioxide, hydrogen sulfide, and from methane. And for such process, they used to get the energy from the oxidation of inorganic materials. Okay, so this is called chemosynthesis. And those organisms or those bacteria which used to perform chemosynthesis, which used to produce the food particles by the help of chemosynthesis, is known as chemosynthetic or chemotropic or chemotrophs. So under autotrophic mode of nutrition, you have to remember about autotrophic or photoautotropic or holophytic mode of nutrition and chemotropic or chemosynthetic mode of nutrition. Now let's go into heterotrophic mode of nutrition. Heterotrophic means those who are not able to produce their own food, but they are dependent on the autotrophs. Clear? They are called for example, human beings, animals. We are not able to prepare our own food. We are dependent directly or indirectly on the autotrophs for the source of food. Clear? So, heterotrophic mode of nutrition, where the organisms are called heterotrophs, which are dependent on autotrophs for the food particles or for the food materials. So we have got two types of heterotrophic mode of nutrition. Number one is called saprotrophic nutrition and number two is called holozoic nutrition. Now what do you mean by saprotrophic nutrition and holozoic nutrition? In case of saprotrophic nutrition, the heterotrophs, remember heterotrophs means those organisms which are not able to prepare their own food but are dependent on the autotrophs. So in saprotrophic nutrition, the heterotrophs used to absorb the fleet food through the body surface of other organisms. Clear, like sedate organisms, which is also called saprozoic nutrition. Example, you can say earthworm and implants as saprophytic nutrition, example fungi. Alright, then comes the holozoic nutrition, in which the organisms used to take the solid food particles from the mouth. Listen carefully. In holozoic nutrition, the organisms used to take in the solid food particles from the mouth and used to digest it. Clear? And those process of digestion, it occurs through the alimentary canal. And those organisms who performs holozoic mode of nutrition, they are called holotrophs. And there are certain organisms like Euglena where we find more than one mode of nutrition, and in those organisms where we find more than one mode of nutrition, they are known as mixotrophs, mixotrophs. Okay, they are known as mixotrophs, and their mode of nutrition or feeding is known as mixotrophic nutrition. So under the mode of nutrition, we have got two types of nutrition, autotrophic and heterotrophic. So under autotrophic, we are going through photoautotrophic or holophytic nutrition, and we have learned about chemosynthetic or chemosynthesis. Clear? And we have learned about heterotrophic mode of nutrition, where we have gone through saprotrophic nutrition and holozoic nutrition, and even we have discussed about the mixotrophic nutrition. All right. So the animals, learn this very carefully. The animals which are dependent on the plant for the source of food, they are called herbivores. You know what is herbivore, carnivore, omnivore. Okay, so herbivore are dependent on the green plants for their food, and those organisms who used to feed the herbivore, all right, who used to prey upon the herbivore, they are called carnivore. And animals which depends on plant as well as an animal are known as omnivore. So we have got herbivore that depends on green plants, we have got carnivore that feeds upon the herbivore, and we have got the omnivore which feeds on both plants and animals. Listen very carefully. Clear? Now next criteria, it's modes of energy utilization. Clear? So on the basis of energy utilization, organisms can be put into three groups. What are those three groups? First one is producer. I'll discuss one by one. Then we have got consumer. Then we have got decomposer. So this particular grouping has been done on the basis of energy utilization. So what do you mean by producer? The green plants are called producer. Why? Because the green plants contain chlorophyll, and they are able to entrap the light energy, or we can solar energy. Okay, and those solar energy are utilized for the synthesis of food particles. All right, mainly the presence of carbon dioxide and water, and such process is known as photosynthesis. So since green plants used to synthesize the food in our ecosystem, so such green plants are known as producer. Okay, after producer we'll get the consumers. Consumers are not able to prepare their own food, okay, but they are dependent on the green plants. That's why we have got primary consumer, we have got secondary consumer, and we have got tertiary consumer. So consumer means the animals which eat the plant. Clear? Okay, so those animals which used to eat the plant, they are called primary consumer or herbivore, because herbivore used to eat the plant. Now there are certain animals which prey upon the herbivore. Okay, so such animals are called secondary consumer or carnivore. So secondary consumer will feed upon the primary consumer, will prey upon the primary consumer. And there are larger carnivorous animals which feed on secondary consumer, and they are known as tertiary consumer, or we can say larger carnivores. So primary consumers are preyed upon by the secondary consumer, and secondary consumer are preyed upon by the tertiary consumer. So primary consumer, simple herbivore, we can say like a grasshopper, we can give an example. Okay, secondary consumer, let's give example like, for example, secondary consumer. Okay, for example, let's give a primary consumer, goat, G-O-A-T, goat. Okay, goat is an herbivore, it's a herbivore which may eat the plant. Now that goat is taken up by the secondary consumer. Clear? You can give another example of secondary consumer. Okay, say for example like tiger in all things. Okay, then larger consumer carnivore used to mainly feed upon the secondary consumer also. So there was tertiary consumer. So here you can see the flow of energy from the green plants, that is from the producer. It goes to the primary consumer. From the primary consumer, the energy goes into the secondary consumer, and from the secondary consumer, the energy goes into the tertiary consumer. I'll give you one simple example of grassland. Okay, the grassland will find the grasses. The green grasses are the producers. Now those grasses are being taken up by the primary consumer, let's say grasshopper, or let's say a toad. Okay, we can give the example of grasshopper, simple example. Now that grasshopper, which is mainly a primary consumer, is taken up by the secondary consumer, which can be a frog. Clear? Then their secondary consumer, that frog or toad, is taken up by the tertiary consumer, which can be a snake. Clear? So by this way, the energy which was produced by the green plants, by the producer, by synthesizing food particles, is being transferred from the producer to the primary consumer. Example I given grasshopper. Then from primary consumer to secondary consumer, frog or toad, and from the secondary consumer to the tertiary consumer, snake. Clear? And even on top of that, we will find the apex predator, which is called the vulture or eagle, which will feed upon the snake. Clear? So by this way, energy will move from producer to primary consumer, secondary consumer, then to tertiary consumer. And lastly, when all those living organisms will die, when the primary consumer will die, when the secondary consumer will be dead, when tertiary consumer will be dead, all of them will be decomposed by the help of decomposers. Decomposers play an important role in our ecosystem. Okay, so bacteria and fungi, they are the example of decomposers, will help in the decomposition of dead animals and plants into simple inorganic compound. Clear? And those compounds, those inorganic compounds, are again used by the green plants, the source of nutrients. So by this way, the energy will flow from one level to another level. So decomposers play an important role in decomposition of those dead plants and animals. And whenever the dead plants and animals will be decomposed into simple inorganic compound, those compounds will be utilized by the producers, by the green plants, again as the source of nutrients. Right? Now last one, the last criteria of five kingdom classification systems is phylogenetic relationship. Now, what is phylogeny? So, phylogeny is the evolutionary history of an organism. Now, how can we trace the evolutionary history of an organism? Simply by the study of fossils. Okay, fossil record will help us to study the evolutionary history of an organism. So we are able to trace the evolutionary history of a human being. How? By the study of fossils. But the fossil records can not provide such relationship in details. We can say that. Okay, though the fossil records can provide such relationship, but those records are incomplete. Okay, so therefore the phylogenetic relationships are ascertained on other certain criteria also. And what are those criteria? Simply morphology. Morpho means body form or body structure. Note it down. Morpho means body form or body structure. Logy means to study. So we can study the morphological or the body features of an organism. Clear? Number two, cytology, the study of cell. Cyto means cell. Logy means study of cell. Genetics, the study of genes. Okay, and the mode of inheritance of character from parent to offspring. Then biochemistry means the type of molecules like DNA, RNA, lipid proteins which are present in our body. And physiology means the life-saving processes that occurs in a living organism. Like example, in case of plants, we have got photosynthesis. In animals, we will find respiration, excretion. Okay, these are the process of physiology. Clear? So the phylogenetic relationships are ascertained from morphology, cytology, genetics, biochemistry, and physiology for the correct grouping of organisms. Clear? So just now we have finished about the criteria for the five kingdom system of classification. The first criteria was complexity of cell structures, where you have to talk about prokaryotic cell and eukaryotic cells. Number two was complexity of body structures, which was unicellular and multicellular. Third one was mode of nutrition. We have got two modes, autotrophic and heterotropic. Under autotrophic, we are learned about phototropic also. We are learned about chemotrophic also. Then heterotropic, we have come under saprotropic and parasitic, sorry, holozoic. Then we are talking about mixotropic also. And last one we are talking about the sorry, fourth one we have talked about the modes of energy utilizations, where we talk about producer, primary consumer, secondary consumer, and tertiary consumer. The last one was phylogenetic relationship, which means the evolutionary history of an organisms. Right, we'll try to trace the evolutionary history of any living organisms, which is mainly based on the study of fossils. But since the study are incomplete, so such relationships are also based on study of body form, morphology, study of cell cytology, study of genes genetics, study of any protein, DNA or RNA in body cells, that is biochemistry, and study of life-saving processes, that is physiology. So on the basis of phylogenetic relationship, we can say that in the five kingdom system of classification, all right, Monera seems to have given rise to Protista. So in the five kingdom system of classification, we can see that the Monera, the kingdom Monera, has given rise to the kingdom Protista. Okay, now from Protista, the three kingdom came into existence. What are the three kingdoms? You can see over here: kingdom Fungi. Okay, then you have got kingdom Plantae and kingdom Animalia. So from Protista evolved all the three kingdoms. And what are they? Fungi, Plantae, and Animalia. Okay, so fungi were the first one to arise from Protista. So fungi were the first one which arise from the kingdom Protista. And billion years later, certain protists gave rise to kingdom Animalia. And about 350 million years ago, some protists evolved into Plantae. Okay, so this is the phylogenetic relationship of the five kingdom system of classification. So in today's class, we have simply talked about the biological classification. We have just discussed the definition of biological system classification. We have just gone through the history of classification from the time of Aristotle to time of Linnaeus. Then we have discussed about Ernest Haeckel, then Copland. Then we also talk about the role of this one. R.H. Whittaker, which proposed the five kingdom system of classification, the most acceptable kingdom of classifications. And under that kingdom, we have learned that we have got five main kingdoms. We have got kingdom Monera, right? We have got kingdom Protista, we have got kingdom Fungi, we have got kingdom Plantae, and we have got kingdom Animalia. Then we have gone through the criteria for the five kingdom system of classification. In the next class, we will learn the characteristics of the five kingdom that's proposed by R.H. Whittaker. So this much for today. See you in next class. Thank you.